Welcome. So today, first I just want to show you some examples of different watercolor projects that I've done and have really helped me with my creativity as well as being mindful, being in the moment, and expressing myself. So a few different examples I have. I love to start with just simple shape and color activities where I don't have to worry so much about what the picture's going to be. I just think of simple shapes and colors. It's a fun way to just play with the paint and be in the moment. Another thing I love to do is write journal entries and paint over them. So by journaling, we're thinking about something we're going through, getting our thoughts out, expressing ourselves. And then on top of that, I usually like to paint a word or a phrase or something that can help me think about whatever it is that might make me feel better in the moment. Sometimes I also like to paint some actual imagery and using colors that are inspiring or calming to me. So I love beach scenes and the thought of the waves moving back and forth. So I like to connect to nature a lot and think of movement in nature and our breath. I also think that flowers are a great subject to study for their growth and thinking about the process. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And a portrait that might be a little more symbolic instead of worrying about the end results, really just expressing ourselves. So these are some of the things that we're going to do together. And to start, to get our supplies, we'll start with some watercolor paints. I've got a watercolor brush and an acrylic brush, size 8. It's a good medium size. And I'm going to take out my sketchbook now. I've actually already started a little journal entry here that I'm going to use to get started with that watercolor technique. So we'll get right into it. Grab yourself a cup of water, your paints, your brushes, and I always like to have a paper towel on hand so that if I do have a spill or something, I can go right over it. So take a few minutes to write down how you're feeling in the moment. I like to write affirmations sometimes to get myself in a positive headspace. So some of the things I wrote were, I trust myself and I'm good at what I do. I will let go of expectations I have in my art and my life that do not serve me. I am enough. I deserve to have fun, and I'm naturally creative and can do many things. Learning something new inspires me. Meeting new people is fun and exciting. I can act like a kid when I make art and get messy, and I will do my best to be in the moment. I wrote those things because I may not always believe that positive feeling, but my goal is to be positive, and when I make my art, I try to think about that so that I can let go and have fun with it instead of worrying about the end result. So when I do my journal entry activities like this, I consider it intuitive painting. So I'm just going with my gut and picking colors that are beautiful to me. And sometimes you may not know where to start. So the best advice I can give you is to just put a mark on the page. Once you get a mark on the page, you might start to see things, and you might play with how colors interact with one another. You could just paint blobs, you could paint shapes. Really, for intuitive painting, I kind of do whatever I'm feeling in the moment, and trying not to judge it is the biggest thing. So as we're painting, we're always having a different intention depending on what we're trying to make. And in my activity today with you doing this journal entry, it's really just to get some paint on the paper and have fun kind of covering up your affirmations or your journal, whatever written word you have today. Sometimes that can inspire whatever you're thinking about. So mine was kind of positive and bright. I'm trying to let go of expectations and have fun with my art. So I'm not worrying so much about the end result. I just want to cover the paper. And sometimes if your colors blend a lot together, it can all turn what we call muddy or brown, and you might not think that that's so beautiful. But again, we're just worried about actually doing something. So we're creating something today, and it may not be a certain image that you have in your head, but we'll get to different shapes and different ways to use watercolor. But I love doing these little journal entries just as a starting point to get me going and to play a little bit as I'm beginning my art. So it's a quick warm-up and will only take a few minutes. And you can see I've stuck to like 2 colors here. I've been using my acrylic brush because it actually holds a little bit less water, so my colors won't blend as much. And yeah, I've covered my page, so I'll leave that alone. And something fun to think about is going back to it and in Sharpie or a dark black paint, writing something on top. So for this one, I wrote "Be forgiving and love yourself," and I wrote some things around the edge there. So I'm going to let that dry and invite you to do some other activities with me on the rest of our pages here. So as we talk about mindfulness and being in the moment, another great activity you can do with watercolor, because it does go on the page so easily, is just to practice basic shapes and brush strokes. So controlling your brush is something that you can focus on and will kind of keep you in the moment. Just sort of like a sport when you practice, when you do drills, you're practicing a technique maybe in the sport. Same idea here. So pick a color that you like. It doesn't matter right now. We're just going to do a little watercolor drill to get us being in the moment. So I'm putting a lot of paint on my brush here, and to get watercolor paint to really go on your brush, you want to add a few drops of water, and then I like to twirl my brush around. I find it gets more paint on the brush that way. I'm just going to practice painting a row of lines. So as you paint these lines, you could play with how you hold your brush. Maybe you press down. Maybe you hold it straight up. And as you're doing this, connect with your breath. When we hold our breaths, whatever activity we're doing is tight and controlled and stiff. To loosen up is really important in painting, so your brush strokes can flow and you can easily find that movement. So if you're feeling like it's hard to just paint that straight line, remember it's all about the process and not the end result. It's okay if they're not perfect. So you can tell yourself that as you paint and just breathe it out. Some artists even follow their breath as they paint, so breathing in with one line, breathing out with the other, and you can go back and forth like that, breathing in and breathing out, and in and out. Try that a few times, in and out. You might actually find that your lines become straighter and closer together because you are really focused on that breath and your body is connected to your mind. And that's what painting does. We're telling our hands to do something, and if we're not connected, if we're not in the moment, we have less control over what our brush does. So keep breathing as you do those lines. And after you've done a few, it's fun to kind of loosen up after something a little bit rigid, like painting straight lines. So I like to just kind of paint some waves after that, thinking about the beach and waves flowing in and out and our breath. So take another color now, and I just think about water and blue, so I'm taking some blue here. And same idea with your breath, but this time see if you can do a flowy line. And then wet your brush without color and do a very wet stroke. This is called a wet on wet technique. So our paint is wet, and I'm dipping my brush in water without any paint on it, and I'm doing another line, and the paint is soaking down. It's flowing just like the water, the waves on a beach. And you might want to control that or put your brush in it and fix those drips. But that is something we want to work on, to just let it be and to appreciate the beauty of the paint and the flowy properties. So every time I do a stroke of paint, I'm going to wash my brush and just do a stroke of water and let that paint flow down. Continuing to just breathe, let the water flow. What I really love about watercolor is those little happy accidents, those things that I didn't plan for that just kind of happen as I let the water flow. So we've tried a few different things to get us started, getting us in the flow here. I'm gonna go to my other page now and try a few different watercolor techniques. So move over here. For this page, I've divided it into 3 sections because I want to do some more specific activities with you. On my first column, I'm going to paint shapes kind of like my circles here and overlap them. Another great thing about watercolor is it's transparent, and that quality makes it really interesting when you overlap things. And it requires a little patience. So with watercolor, I like to do a few things at once, so while one dries, I can do something else. So we're going to start with our row at the top. You can just draw lines across your page. And I like to tell my students, again, don't worry about it being perfect. So you don't need a ruler. Just do your best to draw a straight line. And if you keep breathing and focus on your breath, you may surprise yourself. So to paint a perfect circle, something really fun is if you just twirl your brush around, not pressing too hard because you don't want to smush the hairs on your brush, but just a simple twirl, you'll get a pretty good circle. And you don't even need to add more paint sometimes on your brush. You can just get lighter circles. So you can try this technique a few times. Again, just focusing on being in the moment, breathing, not worrying about if it's a perfect circle. Just make a couple in different areas. You don't want it to be straight across. And then when you have almost no more paint on your brush, you can wash it and take a different color. And paint some more circles in the empty area. So you can use this swirl technique, but you can also just, with your hand-eye coordination, do your best to paint a circular shape. So I like to go around the circle a few times. Kind of helps me get that perfect shape. So far, I haven't really touched the yellow circles yet, but I'm going to now. So I'll paint over them. Because my yellow circles are still a little bit wet, they'll start to blend, which I think is the really fun part, to see how they blend. And I'm not adding any more paint on my brush, I'm just using the paint that I have. And this will make that transparent quality of the watercolor really stand out. So seeing how the circles interact, it's kind of like in life, how we connect with people and if we have built up some walls, some mental walls, maybe we are having a hard time connecting with people or getting close with anyone or finding friends, and maybe we need to loosen up a little bit and let go of things. And these circles are, wet and fluid and letting go and blending into each other. So we want to keep our personalities, we want to honor ourselves, but to connect with people is so fun and exciting, and we can think like watercolor and be loose and open to different things, can really start to feel present in the moment and not worry too much about the future or the past or what we think of ourselves. Just connect with other people. So back to my circles. I still have some white space here. My goal is to fill it up. So I'm going to pick another color now. You could do any colors that you like. Since yellow and blue make green, I find this a nice color scheme. This is called an analogous color scheme. These three colors on the color wheel are next to each other, and they look really nice together. Your watercolor palette is in the order of the color wheel or the rainbow, so if you pick any colors next to each other, they'll look nice together. And just fill the empty spaces with circles. Just paint those circles and don't worry about anything else. And if it's not perfect, that's okay too. Sometimes it's more interesting and more unique when your art is a little different. So if I give you an activity and it's not working out for you or you're getting frustrated, as soon as you recognize that, you can just move on and let that expectation go and do something that is inspiring to you. So maybe you want to paint squares or triangles or stars or blobs. That's totally fine. I just think this activity is fun to see how they overlap, so any shape could work. Alright, so I'm going to let those dry, and I'm going to do another technique down here and wash my brush. So thinking about nature, we've talked about the beach and waves and things connecting and overlapping. I love focusing on nature and thinking about flowers and the way that they flow and are very expressive. So this little painting here was my inspiration for this next activity. You could pick whatever color you want, but just for fun, thinking about the petals of a flower and how they blossom, how they grow. Just like people, we blossom, we grow, we get bigger. Starting from the center here, I'm just going to paint a little circular shape for the center of my flower. And then I'll branch out and get a little bigger, going one way. And the trick to making flowers look like flowers in watercolor, we're doing them a little abstract, so we're not trying to get a perfectly realistic looking flower, is to not have everything touch. So I'm painting one way and then the other way, kind of like a C and a backward C. And as I get around the outside of the flower, I'm pressing down a little more on my brush, and that will make it look like the flower petal is a little bigger. And I'll press down even bigger on the next one. And if they do touch, what's beautiful about the watercolor, just like we saw with the circles, is the color will bleed into itself and it makes it look like the petals of a flower, how it gets lighter. And I haven't taken any more color on my brush. I'm still using the red that I dipped in for the first circle there because I want it to get a little lighter. If you've ever noticed the petals of a flower, they're pretty tight together in the center, and as it blooms and opens up, just like our breath, it airs out, gets bigger. So as you do this as well, you could think about your breath and open up and get bigger and bigger breaths as you make this flower. So we'll try that now as we paint this, going outwards and out, taking deeper and deeper breaths. And on my last sheet here, I'm going to wash my brush again. We did flowers and the journaling and some shapes. I'd like to invite you with a pencil or a Sharpie or a pen now to do a little drawing, a little portrait. We'll call it a symbolic self-portrait, so it doesn't have to look like you. It could be any person that you have in your mind right now. We're just going to draw a face and no judgment. Again, this is symbolic. It's a way to envision ourselves in this moment. So we'll start with eyes, the pupil in the center. Maybe you want to draw a side profile. You can do that too. This could be cartoony or realistic. The nose. If you think of the letter L, you can do a sideways kind of nose. Some lips. Maybe cheekbone. I like to do the hairline first and then do all the facial features, the chin. You can have a crazy hair day, do some crazy hair, long hair, short hair. Maybe a little bit of a shirt. And once you get the basic face down, let's make this portrait in colors to express you. So you can start anywhere on your page, the shirt, the face, the clothes, and just continue going with the flow. What shirt would you be wearing today? What color would represent your mood? Or colors? Maybe you have a two-tone shirt. And if you could dye your hair any color, maybe you want a streak of blue. Or maybe you're fine with your whatever natural color hair you got. You can add some natural colors. This is totally up to you. Your portrait, you decide. And on the face, you can have some fun with it. If you were to decorate your face with some face paint or a mask, what fun colors and shapes would you add? And I like to paint the background to match whatever I've painted in my portrait. So if you're feeling stuck and you don't know what colors to add in your portrait, you can also start painting a little bit in the background, and maybe that will inspire you to paint something on your face. Okay, so we've done a bunch of different activities. I hope that you found them relaxing and maybe bringing you a little more into the present moment. And I hope you'll join me again for some more. Take care.